Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week at Work, where we bring you the latest trending news and all things HR, technology, and the future of work. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Matt Burns. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yourself? Happy
I'm
Friday.
good. Happy Friday. Yeah, it's been a short week
It's
for
been a
me.
week.
Actually, we had a bank holiday, so I actually forgot what day it was today. But I'm glad it is the weekend. How are things going on your end? I see the beard's going nice and strong.
Yeah. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Vancouver.
Nice. Well, what are we talking about today? What has been happening this week, Matt?
Lots been going on this week. I think I read an article about Airbnb. Did you see the same thing?
Yes, I think if you're on LinkedIn, you couldn't miss it. To be honest, yeah, exactly. So Airbnb's remote work has a sort of had a makeover. Let's just say that
Mm.
they've announced recently that all of their employees can work from anywhere they want, basically, and they won't take a pay cut for doing so. What are your thoughts, Matt?
See, that's the interesting piece because I know there's other employers that are changing compensation based on location. So the fact that Airbnb is doing essentially the rate is the pay rate is the pay rate is the pay rate is a
Yeah.
nice gesture, and I'm sure it puts them in a competitive advantage when they're looking for top talent.
No, definitely, you're right. I think others like Google and others like Cisco and Microsoft have done the same. But as you said, depending on where you're based,
Mm.
it will affect your salary up to 20-30% in some
Mm.
cases, which is pretty significant as
But
well.
here's my question, Chris, because I've been in, I've been in the corporate world for a lot of years. Because you can work from anywhere, doesn't mean people will work from anywhere. So we have to discount the fact that there's a percentage of our workforce that's just not able to have that kind of flexibility. They own homes, they have families, they have obligations in their local communities. So they're not able to do that. But I think the really interesting piece in the context of work is what's it going to mean for proximity bias? Traditionally, in organizations, the closer you are to the head office, the
Yeah,
more influence that you have. And that might mean things like upward progression and promotability. And I wonder for those folks that are very ambitious and trying to be upwardly mobile, if they're going to take the opportunity to work from other places, or if they're going to fear that they're going to be shut out from some of the big decisions that are occurring kind of at the HQ, as it were.
yeah, it's an interesting one. You're right, because that's been a fear for many people, and I can say, personally, friends, family members, even are still going into the office, and if I speak to them, they're like, "Oh, well, I want to make sure I'm involved in those conversations. I see my manager. I don't want to be overlooked." In fact, unfortunately, one of the friends I spoke to, one of her leaders said to her, "Oh, I didn't even put your name in for that role because I thought you want to work from remote full time, so I didn't think that you would want that opportunity." It's like, whoa. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So now this obviously this unconscious bias is creeping in, and people don't even realize it. It's called unconscious bias for a reason. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the other things they added is that the employees at Airbnb also have the flexibility to work from anywhere in the world from September for up to 90 days at a time. What do you think about that?
See, again, I like that. I think it's a great um, initiative. It's a great perk. How often will it be used? I go back to just because we have it, will we use it? Netflix has had unlimited PTO for years. That manifesto that was released 10 plus years ago about giving people unlimited vacation. But when they actually peeled back the layers of the onion, were people actually taking significant amounts of vacation? Some were, many weren't. And I think we're in this culture in this time when we're very much glamorizing that grind culture, that hustle culture. People are working longer hours. The pandemic didn't help that. It kind of actually blurred the lines between work and home. And I found lots of people were working late into the evenings, on their weekends. Sure, they had more flexibility during the week, but on aggregate, the hours they're working actually were more than going into the pandemic. So I wonder if that's going to continue coming out of it.
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons is really that they're seeing this as a big play for talent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that's the main goal of this. You think that that's going to really help attract and retain talent?
Absolutely. And I think about certain roles like developer roles in particular, individuals that may not be as interested in upward mobility, but are more interested in things like compensation and flexibility and job satisfaction. it's going to give them a significant advantage. I think every major organization now, well, heck, every organization in general, is essentially a tech company. We
Yeah.
all need developers. We all need tech people. And some of these roles are very, very difficult to find, which is why the rates of them are creeping up higher and higher and higher. I think it's actually a really smart move from a traction point of view.
Yeah. One of the interesting things I thought was quite funny, they ended the article by saying, Mr. Chesky still wants employers to meet up regularly, employees, sorry, to meet up regularly for meetings, social events, and structured major product releases. So there's still that expectation to be seen to some extent. You know, this isn't completely remote.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's you're trying to play with those two balance points. Do you take the flexibility and do you take the time for yourself? Or are you spending more time in the office and trying to politic and make it and drive influence? I just know that as somebody who led lots of large transformational projects, I would have had a very hard time doing that for multi-year projects remotely.
Yeah. I'm wondering what all of those other tech company employees are thinking now, the ones that, for example, at Google that have just recently agreed to a pay cut in order to work from home, whether that's, you know, and now they're like, oh, how does that look? Well, it'd be interesting for people listening on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts? We'd love to hear your thoughts and perspectives. Is that something that you see as a positive, or you think, it's great, but I'm not more likely not to use it anyway for those reasons that Matt just mentioned?
Well, here's the explicit question. If you're an employee in an organization, would you take work from home flexibility or work from anywhere flexibility if you knew that it would slow your career progression?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting.
Answer in the chat.
Yeah, answer in the chat. It also may depend on what stage of people's lives they're in, right? If they're raising kids right now, then they're like, maybe okay, it makes more sense from a work-life balance perspective. Or if you're young and you're just coming into the workplace and you want to progress quickly, then your answer is going to be completely different. You probably want to be in the office, in the mix, networking, building your personal brand internally as well. So it's going to be different for everyone.
I think it'll mirror what we saw in the pandemic for the folks that were missing working from the office. So when they did the studies early in the pandemic and throughout the course of the last 2.5 years, studies showed that the individuals who most missed the office environment were the individuals who relied upon it for a lot of their social connection, or individuals that were new into the organization who maybe didn't have those tight cultural binds. They didn't have those opportunities to connect around the water cooler or go for lunches with their colleagues or Friday afternoon drinks. They just simply were kind of shut out and kind of in a box. Whereas individuals who'd been with the company for longer tenure or who maybe didn't rely upon the organizations for more of the social connections were more apt to want to stay at home. So I think that was an interesting study that was shown during the pandemic. And I think that trend will continue coming out of it.
Mm-hmm. What's the data saying though, in terms of remote work, in terms of the increase on, for example, employee happiness? I know there's been some articles that have come out about that recently.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. There's a study actually recently, global study by a company called Tracking Happiness. And they look at
Great name, by the way. That's a great name. Is that the name of the company or the study?
That's the name of the company. And I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, I would say.
That's a very good name.
They surveyed 12,455 employees around the world on their work conditions. And they asked them essentially two questions, Chris. The first one is, if you look at your work, how would you rate your happiness on a scale of 1 to 10? So pretty subjective. And then they asked them a second question, which was, how much of your work is currently done remotely or from home? And some of the key findings of the study were that the ability to work from home increases employee happiness by as much as 20%. And back to your earlier point, millennials, the millennial generation, are happiest when they're working remotely. And returning to office-based work after the pandemic has been proven to reduce employee happiness. And that's as a result of things like increased commute times, more cost, and happiness at work is significantly correlated to overall life happiness.
Yeah. Are we surprised?
No.
Exactly. No one. Not one person's like, really? So, what a shock there as well. Yeah. It's interesting because I am seeing many large companies slowly revert back to old ways, which I'm more so than I thought as well. But it seems crazy with the rate that people are leaving businesses. and that they're losing talent, they're still continuing in this direction? Is it just people just, we've been doing it for so long, people's habits are just so ingrained? What do you think is driving this?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think first and foremost, the individuals making those decisions usually aren't the millennials we're talking about. They're people that grew up in a work environment like you and I, Chris, where office was the environment. So the last 2.5 years represented a disruption to what they actually liked and were comfortable with and benefited from. And whereas the millennial generations, or those coming up through their career, certainly enjoyed the more flexibility and therefore felt a different energy around it. I think that's part of the conversation. I think the other part of it is just understanding that old habits are hard to break. And
Yeah.
organizations have built infrastructure around meeting in the office. They have policies, they have practices, they have strategies, they've made significant investments in infrastructure. So while they may reduce their office space, while they may provide more flexibility, the office is still the way that they know how to get things done, which is why you see more and more organizations trying to provide carrots for people to come back to the office. So while they may provide flexibility to work from home, you see events from companies like Microsoft and Google throwing large internal concerts for their employees, having free food, catering events, trying to bring people back together to kind of lure them back to the office, which is getting increasingly harder, as I mentioned, Chris, because those commute times are getting longer. The price of gas going up with inflation and all the other challenges in the world, it's more expensive. So they're really having to provide a compelling reason to be back in the office other than it's the way we've always done things.
Yeah. Well, in stark contrast to that, to add on to that, I suppose there's been a number of, as you know, law firms that have been under fire, a bit of heat in the UK, that are saying to their employees, you can work from home, but we're just gonna have a blanket 20% pay rise, regardless of your role and part of the organizations. And many of them have justified it by saying, well, other law firms are doing it in our space. How crazy is that as a decision making? Like, they actually did an announcement. I think it was a spokesperson for, was it Stevens and Harwood? I think one of them said, this is consistent with the approach taken by many city law firms. What does that mean for the individual employee? They don't care. So it's like, sorry, Ivan, you can't work from home and you're going to give you a 20% pay cut. Why is that? Oh, because everyone else is doing it. That's actually the most craziest. Like,
it's actually perfect for a law office to say that. That's such a law office thing to say, right? It's like, it's about precedent. It's about what everybody else is doing. It's not about individuality. It's about following the herd. And this one I struggle with, Chris, for a couple of reasons. So what's the connotation of saying that somebody's work is 20% less valuable because it's being done at home versus the office? That's what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what they're saying. But also at the same time, they're saying that this one in particular is saying that you can work 2 days remotely for the same salary, but you had those additional 3 days, it's now 20% cut off your salary. So
well, maybe it's just I'm a bit of a I like to poke the bear a little bit, but here's the way my mind thinks. If there's less people working in the office, the organization should incur less overhead costs. So the costs to employ me have dropped. If you need to provide me a desk and a workstation in a shiny office, then the cost to the firm goes up. If I'm working from home, you have to supply me with a laptop and a phone, which you had to anyway in the office. So as an organization, your cost burden is actually less. You're going to pay me less as well, and yet you can expect the same contributions. Because what I didn't see there was I have to do 20% less work. I assume the workload's exactly the same,
yeah, exactly.
And the deliverables are exactly the same.
Yeah, 100% as well. I just still so you can imagine I still can't get over other law firms are doing that. That's the worst rationale of why someone should do something ever. What does this mean for me as well? Some common themes here. What else we got, Matt? That's pretty much all of the things that we got.
Well, I mean, there's one more thing I wouldn't mind talking about. That's cool with you. There's this. It's a bit of a sensitive topic, Chris, but the idea of workplace banter, and I think we've all spent the better part of 2.5 years in a bit more of an informal work culture. I don't know about you, but my dress code has taken a couple of steps back from what it used to be when I was in the corporate world. Definitely wearing a lot more yoga pants.
Clean shaven Matt's gone.
Yeah.
I was looking through the photos for today's show, Matt. I was up for your headshot, and I found one with you clean shaven, and I didn't even recognize you. I was like, "Oh, there's Matt. There's
like a time capsule." Yeah, it's like pre-COVID, post-COVID. but I think there's been a lot more. That's a nice microcosm. My beard is a microcosm for the shifts that have happened in culture. It's becoming much more informal and much more colloquial, which is, I think, is a good thing. The challenge runs into how we interact with each other, and we're seeing a rise across, specifically in this article, the UK, of employment lawsuits related to harassment around workplace banter. And there seems to be a new line being drawn around what employees will tolerate and what organizations and their obligations to ensure a respectful workplace culture. And I mean, Chris, a couple examples here they talked about, just to give people a sense of what that is. We had one case where a female banker at Barclays, UK-based bank, whose line manager referred to women in the organization as birds. Now, I mean, a term that might have been appropriate years ago, but now it's 2022, and objectification of anybody is just not acceptable. And that individual won an award for harassment in that case. They felt unwelcome in that environment. But it's a really nice microcosm in a difficult conversation, because the argument from Barclays and from that line manager was, well, it's just workplace banter. We didn't mean any harm by it. Well, I grew up in a world where it doesn't really matter how you intend it. It matters how the person receives it. And I think that's the line that organizations need to be looking at, is your intentions are not as important as how the message is received. And we need to be careful about the language that we use to ensure that people feel included and not excluded, particularly in remote work environments where the opportunities for miscommunication go up tenfold when you can't maybe read body language as closely, when you can't have a chance to take somebody aside. It's got to be careful.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but especially virtually, right? Because you can't have you read the body language or the intention, or it's just, and also the group dynamic of some people on the call, some people in the office, because you may feel excluded that they're having that banter in person, and then you're on a remote call as well. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one for leaders and managers to navigate that as well. But I haven't heard anything about that until you brought it up. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's going to be an interesting dynamic, and I think we're only just starting to realize how this is going to play out.
I've said it 1,000 times before. Being in HR, I always feel like I have great job security.
Yeah, now more than ever. you're pretty busy from that one. Well, I think that's it, Matt.
Yeah.
This is for everyone listening. This is going to be a short live stream that we're going to do every single Friday around the same time. So what we should do, Matt, is do a poll kind of on LinkedIn during the week of what topics people want us to talk about, right? So we'll do a poll during the week of here's some suggestions of topics, and then based on the highest rating of the polls, we'll just talk about those topics to get everyone involved.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, share, tagging colleagues that you feel that would find it interesting. Make sure you go and follow Matt on LinkedIn. He's already tagged in, so make sure you follow him there. Follow us if you're not already following us. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone. See you later, Matt.
Bye.